What happens next? What happens next? You've had this incredible week at camp. You've been away from the normal distractions. You've been around incredible people who have poured into your life this week. What happens next? I found myself asking this question about a year ago. I mentioned that I have 5 kids. I want to show you a photo of my family here. And so we'll see if this comes up. There we go. Aww. So I have 5 kids, like I said, and I want you to take note of the one in the center. His name is Madsen. I have 5 kids. 2 of them are particularly crazy. And so one day I'm driving in the car, and I'm with a friend, and my wife calls me, and she said, I got to tell you what Madsen did today. And whenever this happens, I'm a little bit nervous. You know, I know something's coming, and so I said, all right, I'm ready. What happened? And she said, Madsen swallowed a nickel. Okay. And I asked the question, what happens next? Like, what do you do now? This son of mine has just, ingested a nickel. That's not a healthy thing. What happens next? And so she goes, well, I have a call into the doctor. I don't know. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. And I was getting ready to go out of town, and so I'm a little bit nervous now for her and all that she has to do. And I said, well, I could turn around if I have to. And she goes, well, just keep driving. I'll let you know what the doctor says. She calls me back a few minutes later. She says, well, the doctor said that most likely they won't have to do surgery. So that's great news. What do we do? And she goes, we just need to wait for him to pass it. Now, in case you're not sure what that's reference to, it's to a bodily function that we do. We have a number assigned to it, and it's not the number 1. Okay, so use your imaginations. And so I said, he's got to pass it? She's like, yeah, he's got to pass it. That's what happens next. Okay, I said, how long is that going to take? And she goes, could take days, could take weeks. So we have a little bit of a predicament in our household. We've got a son with a nickel inside of him, and we got to get it out. And so they have to ensure that he actually passes it. So someone has to check to see if it's gone through. And when I say someone, I mean my wife, because I don't do that kind of thing in our household. And so she has to set up this little porta potty in our house so he can go in and so that she can go through each time that he has a bowel movement and see if there's a nickel in there. Imagine that setting in a household day after day. So every time Matthew goes, hey, I got to go to the bathroom again, it's everybody on deck, all right, to the places, people. Everyone's getting ready. My wife's going in there with them. She's getting it ready, and it's like, all right, and then we all would hold our breath. Is this going to be the one? Is this the time? And then, nope, no nickel. And so we'd go back, and it's business as usual on day after day of this. And again, we're just waiting. What is going to happen? Because if he doesn't pass this thing, he's going to have surgery, and that is a very invasive surgery. So finally one day, she's in there, and she's like, all right, he's got to go to the bathroom again, and we're all praying, please, Jesus, I need this nickel to pass. I need him to get this out. And all of a sudden, I hear this incredible sound, and it's my wife saying, yes, there's a nickel in the poop. And we start high-fiving everybody in my household, and we're cheering, and we're celebrating, and it's the greatest moment in the world, and we are so excited. And then we had a really strange discussion on what do you do with a nickel that has passed through your son. Now, we all had different ideas about this. I had an idea. I thought it would be really cool to keep the nickel, clean it up, of course, but put it on a necklace that he could wear. You know what I mean? And so when he's a teenager, guys, think about this. He could be on a date with a girl. She could be like, that's a cool necklace. Where'd you get that? And he could be like, look, baby, this nickel, it's been through me. You know what I mean? Man, you talk about a first date a girl will not forget. Am I right? And so I had this whole thing, and my wife's like, no, we are not doing that. No son of mine is going to have that. That sounds hideous. But sometimes, guys, you just got to follow your heart. And so the question I have for you tonight, what happens next? You're all on a journey, hopefully a very different journey than this nickel has been on, but you're on a journey. And you can bottle all this up and you can say, hey, it was all about this week, and I'm going to go home the same person I came as. And you're going to miss an incredible opportunity. See, in grammar, we actually have a term for this. It's called an ellipsis. An ellipsis are those three dots that you might see. You start a sentence and you just put dot, dot, dot. In fact, the way you probably know it better as is when you're texting someone and they're texting you back and you see the three dots show up in a conversation, right? That's an ellipsis. That is telling you, hey, there's something else coming. That just hold on, just get ready for it. There's something about to show up on your screen. You ever had that person that you're waiting for? You see that little, ellipsis show up and you're like, man, they are writing a story to me. I mean, this is going to be the best text message I've ever received. They've been working on this thing for 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden it goes away and they don't text you. Anybody else have this happen? And I'm like, no, you owe me a 5-minute long text right now. Like, I've been waiting on this end, with anticipation of what's going to come. And so today I want to give you a challenge. What happens next for you? See, tomorrow, life is going to catch back up with all of us. Tomorrow we go back home to the norm. We go back home to your family, to your regular friends that you see at home. And you go, okay, all this experience that has been so unique and so amazing is now going to be different. So what happens next? Well, I want to give you 3 ideas tonight of what could be next for you. What could happen next? So we're going to look at a story in the life of Peter. I know you've been looking at Peter all week, and I want to show you something remarkable that we see in Peter's life that provides some ideas for us today of what we could do. This comes from Acts chapter 3, verse 1. It says, one day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 in the afternoon. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Peter looked straight at him, as did John, and then Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Now, you have this incredible story here, but before we get to what happens, I want you to notice something. Notice that Peter is not alone. Now, this is a normal day in a lot of ways, that they're just going up to the temple at the time of prayer, but Peter's not doing it alone. Peter takes John with him. And so we see that Peter is doing life with other people. Now, he could go to the temple to pray by himself. He could have a conversation with this man by himself. That's not the story. Peter is with a friend. He's with someone when this whole story goes down. In fact, in these 5 verses I just read, 3 times you have Peter and John mentioned. They're mentioned together. Because he wants you to know, these guys do ministry together. They do life together. And so the first question I want you to think about is, who are you doing life with? Now, this week you've done life with a lot of people. You've had so many people around you. You've probably had just a few moments of alone time. You've had so much time together. But when you go home, will you choose to still do life with people? Will you choose to surround yourself with other people where you go, you know what, I've got this Christianity thing figured out. I can do this on my own. I don't need to do life with others. I have a friend named Tim. And if you know what an extrovert is, Tim is the biggest extrovert I've ever met. He loves being around people. And Tim also happens to be a diehard Yankees fan. So I want to show you a picture of a Yankee game I went to with Tim. And this is my wife and I and Tim and his wife. And so Tim is the one on the far right, obviously. But I want you to notice what I'm wearing in this photo, okay? Because it's going to be important. So I'm at this baseball game with Tim. And we're having a great time. And Tim's the kind of guy that can talk to everyone. And so we're walking in the stadium, and he's making people laugh. I'm not that guy, okay? I'm much better once you get to know me. I don't often do well in public settings like this. But Tim just comes alive. He's talking to everyone. And so we're walking through, and I'm just marveling at the way that Tim does life with other people. And so we're at the Yankee game in Yankee Stadium. We're having a great time. And a foul ball is hit in the section right in front of ours. And so, I'm just watching. It's a very normal play. If you know baseball, it happens all the time, foul balls. And so foul ball goes, and a fan catches it, and he holds it up. He does the thing that all guys do at baseball games, like, yeah, I got the ball. Check me out. I'm awesome. And so I'm sitting there, and, just watching this. And all of a sudden, the guy, is celebrating. And Tim, just out of nowhere, says, hey. I'm looking at Tim like, what on earth is he doing? He's yelling at this guy. Hey. So finally, the guy looks over at us like, what on earth? And Tim says to him, hey, give my friend that baseball. Now, I want to sink down in my seat and vanish right now. Like, what are you doing? I don't want any of this attention. And now all of these people around us are like, well, who's this guy that needs the ball? Why are they, why is this guy asking for it? And so, Tim is standing there, and this guy is just staring at us like, what? And the guy says, why should I give him the baseball? I thought it was a pretty valid question, right? Yeah, why, Tim, why? Why should he do that? And Tim says, again, yelling this out, everyone can hear. He's from Arizona. He's never seen baseball before. I'm looking at Tim. I'm like, what are you doing right now? What's happening? And so this guy looks at me. Now remember, is this still up there? No. You remember what I'm wearing? I'm wearing my Yankees jersey and a Yankees hat. And so the guy says to him, he's fully decked out in Yankee clothes. Again, I thought it was a good point the guy was making. So I look at Tim, and Tim yells out, I just bought that for him. I'm like, okay, Tim, what on earth are we doing here? Now, I never got the ball that day. This guy would not, he was not about to play this game with us. But I've never forgot Tim. I never forgot. All Tim was trying to do was to make sure I had an unbelievable experience at a Yankee game. And if it meant that I got someone else's foul ball by force, he was going to do it. I've always thought, I wonder if I do that for others. Do I care enough about the people in my life that I'm willing to start shouting at others on their behalf? I'm willing to start trying to help them get things that they wouldn't get otherwise. And so for some of you, what you might need to go do, the ellipsis dot for you, could simply be staying together. A commitment for you to say, you know what? I could easily go home and go back into my routine and go back into the person I was and do things the way I did them when I came in this week. But maybe the commitment you need to make tonight is that you say, when I get home, I'm not going home the same person. I'm not going home to be the Lone Ranger anymore. I realize that I need to do life with others. And for some of you, in order for you to stay connected to Jesus, the way that you have felt Jesus this week will require you to stay connected to the people who are in this room right now. And you might be thinking, no, there's no correlation there. It's just me and Jesus. That's all I really need, and this is just great. But here's what we realize. If you try to do this alone, you're not going to experience what Jesus wants you to experience. So who in your life right now do you need to rely on when you go home? Who do you need to be vulnerable with and say, you know what, here's the deal. Here are the things that I'm working through. Here's the areas I need help with. And man, I could really use you in my life. And just tell someone that. Invite them into that and go, here's where I'm at. Who do you need to rely on when you go home? Or who needs to rely on you? Who is in this room right now that you go, you know what, God has put me in their life, and I really believe that if I would be there for them, if I would, sacrifice for them, that would be something really great, that they could really need that. So what if we committed and said, you know what, we're going to stay together. We're not going to go home and just be us. We're not going to seem like we have it all figured out, and how easy it is for us to go, you know what, I don't need other people. I got it. It's just me and Jesus. We got to figure it out. Yet the reality that we see early on is that Peter and John stayed together. There was a team a part of it. And oftentimes as you see through Scripture, you don't see these people doing it just by themselves, and yet that's our tendency. So maybe for you, that's the thing you need to think about. But let's keep reading. And so they have this encounter with this guy. And again, it's Peter and John together. And here's what it says, that as he asks for some money, and this is what they reply with in verse 6. And Peter said, Silver or gold, I do not have. Like, I don't have it. But what I do have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and he began to walk. And then he went with them into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. And when all the people saw him walking and praising God, they recognized him as the same man who used to sit begging at the temple gate called Beautiful. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. Peter is willing to reach out to those who don't know Jesus. Peter is willing to engage this guy in a conversation. And notice that what does the guy ask for? He doesn't ask, hey, I heard who you are. You're Peter, right? You follow that Jesus guy. Aren't you able to heal me? That's not what he asked for. Hey, do you have any money? You ever been asked that before? Ever been walking down a busy city street? Hey, man, do you have any money? You have any money? How easy it is to dismiss those conversations. No, I don't have anything. And you just keep on walking, you ignore it. Peter doesn't ignore it. And yet Peter doesn't even have any money. Peter says, you know what? I'm going to reach out to this guy. I'm going to meet this guy where he is. I'm going to see what I could do for him. It's an incredible example of just being aware of the interruptions. God doesn't expect you to reach out with what you don't have. Just expects you to say, hey, there's someone in front of you. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm a planner. I like to plan things, and so I have to have my day mentally planned out. I know the things that I'm trying to get done. And then these weird interruptions always happen. But sometimes the interruption is the point. Sometimes the interruption is the thing that God had you wake up this morning for. And yet, depending on the way you're wired, you go, no, sorry, I don't have any money. I've got this thing I got to go do. And we miss the opportunities. Are we willing to extend ourselves for others? Are we willing to reach out beyond the comfort zone? Beyond what we feel like, hey, I understand this, and go, you know what? I'm going to do it with others, but I'm going to go beyond for someone else that's not an insider yet, that feels like they're an outsider. Each of my 5 kids have a Yankee middle name. And so that's how diehard we are about the Yankees. And so each of them, some of the people they're named after are dead. Some of them are alive now. But my oldest, his name's Gavin, and his middle name is Mattingly, after a guy named Don Mattingly, who was my favorite baseball player when I was a kid. And so I watched Don Mattingly growing up, and he was, first base for the Yankees. I used to always watch him, and again, he was the guy when I was a little kid growing up. And so now Don coaches different teams. He recently coached the Dodgers, and now he's with the Miami Marlins. And he's coaching these different teams. And so I remember when he was with the Dodgers, I thought, how cool would it be during spring training to try to get Gavin to meet Don? To meet the guy that he was actually named after. And so again, this won't work with all my kids, but I thought at least with Gavin, we'll try to do this. And so we went all out for this. We made a sign. I'll show you the sign that we made, and we had everything, everything going. Hey, Don, please take a picture with my son, Gavin Mattingly. Like, hey, I named him after you, And so I remember going, hey, Gavin, we got to get to the ballpark early. He's much bigger now. This is years ago. And so we're going to the ballpark early, and I'm explaining to him, hey, Don Mattingly is the manager, and if we get there early enough, there's a chance you might get a picture with him. Wouldn't that be amazing? And so we go there early, and we're waiting, and we're there so early, and it's hot if you've been in a spring training game, and Gavin doesn't care. He's over it. He's like, Dad, why are we here? What's going on? I'm like, son, just trust me. This is going to be amazing if we can just make this work. And so I remember there was some stirring in the dugout at one point, and so again, no one else is around us because we're there so early, and I'm looking in, I'm hanging over the ledge of the dugout looking in, and finally I see Don Mattingly emerge from the dugout. Now, we had tried this the previous year, and he wasn't even there that day, the game that we went to. And so I didn't even know if he'd show up. But I remember realizing, Don Mattingly is here. This plan is going to work. And so then I get to the edge of the dugout, and I realize I have one chance to say something to Don Mattingly to get him to respond. Now remember, this is not just the person my son is named after. This is my favorite player when I was a kid. And so I have a little bit of that, kid fan in me as well. And so I lean over the railing and I say the first thing that comes to my mind. I say, hey, Don, I named a son after you. Can I get a picture? And I realized how creepy that sounded once it came out of my mouth. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, oh, man, I wouldn't get a picture with me. Like, this sounds awful. And so I'm leaning over the edge. I'm reaching out here like, I don't know what he's going to do. And he looks up out at the dugout from me and he goes, all right. Like, Gavin, get ready, come on. And so, Gavin has to wake up because, he's like passed out, doesn't care. And so he comes over there and we have this opportunity to meet Don Mattingly. I want to show you the picture that I got. It's just this incredible moment that my son gets to talk to the guy that he's named after. And so we're having this moment talking there, and it is like the coolest thing in the world. I'm just thinking I am dad of the year. I mean, like, if there was an award given out, I sealed this deal. And then Don looks at me as he's standing there and he says, you have a baseball for me to sign? Baseball. Yeah, that would make sense. No, I didn't bring a baseball. I totally forgot. Just thought about a sign, didn't bring a baseball. So I realized I'm standing there in front of Don Mattingly, my favorite kid, my favorite player as a kid, who I named my firstborn child after, and I didn't bring a baseball. You ever had this moment where like I tried, it didn't work out? And so I literally realized, I thought that I'd gone, I'm dad of the year. I'm like, Gavin's gonna be explaining this to the counselor later in life, and then my dad got me there, he didn't bring a baseball, so there's nothing for me to sign, so I don't have a ball from him, and it was like this whole traumatic experience. And so I'm standing there and I'm like, we brought a sign, I don't have a baseball, and he looks at me, he's like, all right. He leans over the dugout and he goes, hey, get me a ball. This ball boy instantly comes, yes, sir, brings him the ball, and I'm like, that is so cool. And he looks at me, he says, do you have a pen? Okay, Don, that's not funny. I'm like, no, I don't have a pen either. He reaches over, takes a pen from another fan who's standing there, and then he takes the ball and he says, Gavin Mattingly, all my best, Don Mattingly. And like back to dad of the year status, you know what I mean? Like greatest thing ever. Yeah, I applaud for myself right there. That's amazing. So Don saved me from being the worst dad ever. And I remember thinking that day, like, I don't know if I have it in me as an introvert to ask for this, to go to this guy that I don't know and to reach out. And yet what I know, that's the same challenge for all of us. So some of you tonight, the challenge isn't maybe to stay together. Maybe that's part you're like, I got that figured out. Maybe the challenge for you needs to be, will you reach out to others when you get home? You might feel like I've got everything figured out. I'm comfortable. I'm contained. Will you reach out to others? Because when you start doing this, you realize that it's incredible the way you can change others. So we got to meet, Don Mattingly that day, and Gavin got to take a picture of him. Well, this became a thing. Then every time, Don was in town, Gavin would say, Dad, let's go meet Don Mattingly again. And so I'll show you another picture. Here's another day we met him. And so this is totally different stadium, totally different day, but it became a thing for us. And literally now, my kids are all convinced I can introduce them to any Yankee player, and they'll just take pictures with them. But it's the power of reaching out. I'm saying, you know what, you have a need or you have something, and if I would be willing to extend myself for you, I could really change your story. See, Paul looks at this guy and goes, you're asking for money. I don't have any money. And for most of us, that's where the story would end, right? Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I'm just in high school. I don't have money. I can't give you what you're asking for. Peter and John go, yeah, hey, we don't have money, but we do have something else we could give you. We have this guy named Jesus. He's changed our life, and he's going to change your life today as well. And notice the way the text says that. When they reached out, they grabbed him by the right hand. It's a significant detail in the story. They didn't come alongside him and say, let us help you up, sir, and see if your feet will support it. It's a move of confidence. Extend a hand, grab your right hand, pulls him up to his feet. He reaches out for others. See, some of you are going, well, I can't reach out. I'm no good at it. Or I have nothing to offer people. Look, if you've had an experience this weekend and you've realized that Jesus is doing some things in your life, you're in a position to reach out to others. You're in a position to say, hey, I could go back and I could change someone's story forever if I would just extend my hand to them. You know, so when you go back to school, you have all the things set up. You have friends. You have status. You have, an ability to fit in. And the reality is there are tons of people that you'll walk by each and every day who need someone to reach out to them, who are paranoid to go to school in the morning because they don't know who they're going to sit by at lunch. They don't know who's going to stand with them. They don't know how they're going to feel when they get lonely. And all it would take is someone to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out and bring you in. I'm going to invite you in. And it's just a simple challenge to say, when you get home, would you be willing to consider that? To take all that you have and extend it to someone else. And say, you know what, if I'd be willing to reach out, if I'd be willing to meet you where you are, I could actually change your story, maybe the way Jesus has changed my story. And then if you go fast forward in the story, they heal this guy, it's miraculous. There's always a reaction to it, though. And so the religious leaders of the day watch that Peter and John have healed this man, and they're in an outrage about it. How dare you do that? We didn't give you authorization to heal. How do you have the credentials to do this? And they bring them before them, and they have to answer some tough questions. And I love the way they respond in this and what happens. This is in Acts chapter 4. This is the next chapter over. Once they're questioned about this man, again, they bring this guy with them, the guy that's been healed, and it says this. When they saw the courage of Peter and John, and they realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished. And they took note that these men had been with Jesus. But since they could see the man who had been healed standing there with them, there was nothing that they could say. That these men had been with Jesus. You don't have the right credentials. You don't have the look. You don't have the part. You shouldn't be able to do this. But they took note that these men had been with Jesus. I'm sure you can come up with a bunch of excuses why you're not going to have an and then when you get home. No. Jeremy, that's not for me. You don't understand. I can't. I have this or that or whatever. But what would happen if you just realized that you've just spent a week with Jesus? That when you have that, it doesn't matter the credentials that you're missing. See, for some of you, you've so convinced yourself, well, I'm out of the running because I don't have what I need. And notice that Peter and John, these are ordinary, unschooled men. They don't have the look. They don't look the part. And yet, they'd been with Jesus. You ever notice how the people that you're around often shape the way you feel about yourself? I remember I was in an airport sitting down waiting for a flight, and I love people watching at the airport because you see some of the most amazing people ever. And I'm sitting there watching people walk by, and I watched this guy walk in, and he's got this cut-off shirt, with no sleeves, and muscles just I mean, it was like The Rock Part 2. I mean, this guy was just unbelievable. And he comes walking in, and like literally everyone in the airport is staring at this guy. Like, what on earth is going on? Who is this guy? And so I'm watching this guy from afar, and I'm just like, man, this guy needs a hobby other than his body. I mean, it's like, what is he doing? This is unreal. And so I don't think about it. He walks past, and, I carry on with my business. So then we about an hour later, we board the flight. And I always get the window seat, because I like to be away from people. I'm the introvert, so I'm sitting by the window. I can look out and, get lost in my thoughts. And as we're boarding, I realize, someone's coming in next to me, so I always turn to give the initial, hey, nice to see you, how are you? I look over, and it's the bodybuilder. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. You're riding Twinkie on this plane next to me? Like, what? And so he sits down, and I kid you not, it's just like, sits down and goes, like his arms just have to unfold them. And so I'm like not even trying. I'm like, the armrest is yours. Like, I'm not even looking at it. You do what you got to do. But even without the armrest, it is pushing me. His arms are pushing me out, into the window. And so, I'm not the guy that talks to strangers on planes. I'm put some headphones in. I'm doing my thing. I'm the next guy, and I'm like, I have to talk to him. And so I look over to this guy, and I'm like, hey, man. This might be creepy. Can I take a photo of our arms? And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I just want to take a picture of our arms because no one's going to believe this. So I want to show you a photo of my arm next to his arm. don't have to be that dramatic about it. I know you can't see our face there, so in case you're confused, I'm the one on the left. That's me. He's the other arm. Here's the reality. I had self-esteem issues for about a week after that plane flight because I just realized my arm is not that arm. I mean, that arm is a thing of beauty, and it's just huge bicep of an arm. And, I find out the guy is a top 10 bodybuilder in the world, and I'm sitting next to him arm to arm on a flight. You ever notice how who you're with often shapes the way you feel about yourself? I remember how I felt pretty good about myself that day. Felt like I was, had things figured out. I felt pretty good about my body image, and all of a sudden, no, I got to hit the gym. I got to hit the weights, There's something wrong with me. Ever have that friend that makes you feel worse about yourself? Don't look at them if they're here right now. I remember when I was in high school, I had this friend, and he would always make comments to me. Like, wherever he was, he would make comments, and just little nitpicking comments. And no comment by itself was ever huge, but he would make these little comments. And I remember I just got so tired of it. I realized whenever this guy's around, I feel bad about myself because he's always making fun of something or pointing something out about me. And he just didn't do it to me, he did it to everybody. But I remember getting so frustrated, and one day I was wearing sandals, and I don't have the skin that can tan, if you will, and so I have white skin, and he looks down at my feet and he goes, "Oh, those are new socks, huh?" I'm like, all right. And so I just remember that day going, you know what? I don't want to be this kind of a person. And the truth is, I didn't want to be around that kind of person. But let me ask you this. You ever been around a friend that makes you feel like $1 million? That you notice when you're around them, you feel like you could take on the world? I remember I met my wife in high school. We were high school sweethearts. And she said something to me early on that I'll never, ever forget. She said, "You are a really good hugger," which I thought was the weirdest comment. But you know what? I realized if you can make me feel good about a hug, you could probably make me feel good the rest of my life. Oh, you guys are great. I'll tell her I said that. She'll like that. So here's a third option for you in your and then. Maybe some of you need to commit to abide, which is a weird word that we don't use a lot, but this idea of remaining in Jesus. Let me ask you a simple question. If we all talk about how we feel different depending on who we're around, here's a question. How should you feel if you're around Jesus? How does that make you feel? If you were so tangibly present with Jesus, you could sense him there, that he was not just something you talked about or read about or heard about or sang about, but he was a physical, present part of your life. How would that change the way you feel about yourself? See, some of you, the reason why this week has been transformational for you is because you have been with Jesus in ways you've never been with him before. And maybe the commitment for you to go home is to go, you know what? I'm not going to stop that. I'm going to choose to remain in Jesus. I'm going to pursue his presence. That he will change the way I view myself, the way I view others, and the way that I interact with the people in my life, because I have been with Jesus. See, Peter and John had some simple things that they did that changed people's lives. They were willing to do life together. Say, you know what, we're not going to be these spiritual heroes that have it all figured out on their own. We'll do life together. They're willing to reach out to someone that asked for something they didn't even have. They said, we don't have money, but we can give you something else. We'll change your life forever. We'll bring you the power and the healing of Jesus Christ. And they did it as unschooled, ordinary men because they had been with Jesus. So let me ask you a question. What happens next? So we go home, and some of you are going to decide, is this just a fun week that you just got away from everything and it was just an unusual week in the story of your life? Or does this become a week unlike any other week? A week that you will look back on years from now and say, that was the week that changed everything. That was the week I met Jesus in a new way. That was the week I learned how to interact with others in a new way. That was the week I learned how to change people's stories forever with the power of Jesus Christ. Will you go home and will you be the same person that you came in as? Or will you go home with an and then? Will you go home and say, no, something happens next, and I can't go home the same person I came here as? I want to close with one final image for you to consider. I want you to imagine you're at a club. Imagine a DJ is behind the turntables and he's got the headphones on and he's ready to rock out some music. And he gets the beat going, he gets the music going, and you watch him bob his head up and down, and he's getting into the music, and you can see it, except he never turns the speakers on in the room. And so you stand there, and it's awkward as you're all standing there in silence, and you're looking around, and you're going, should someone tell him? Should someone tell him there's no music on? And then you watch this guy so intent in the music, and yet he's unaware that no one else can hear it, that music isn't actually being played for anyone's benefit other than his own. So the reality is, if you walk out of here tomorrow and you're not a different person, and you say, you know what, that's just going to be a crazy week of camp for me, then the reality is that you're going to miss the opportunity that Jesus wants to do something in your life right now. He wants to use your life in a powerful way. He wants to show up and show you how to be a different person when you come home, how to launch into a journey with him. It's a way for you to allow others to hear the music that you have heard. See, if you go home and you go, hey, it's just about me, I'm just going to be that same person, nothing changes. But you say, you know what, Jesus, this is going to be something I'm going to commit to. So I just challenge you guys, don't let this be another week. Don't let this be just a normal thing that you go, oh, no one will ever know I was up at camp. Go back so different, so changed, so uniquely weird that people ask you, what happened to you? What on earth is different about you? And you have a chance to tell the story of what Jesus has done in your life. Let's pray together. God, we pray that you would meet us all here. And we know that your presence has been tangibly felt all week. God, we've celebrated it. We've sung about it. We've read about it. We've talked about it. We've gathered in your name as your church. And yet it would be so easy to go out of this place not as changed people. It goes so easy to go home and be the same people we were. And I pray for the courage for each and every student here today to make a decision, a commitment to go home different. To go home with something clear in their mind of how they're going to live out their faith so that others hear the music. God, we thank you for the ways that you have touched our life, the ways that you have met us here, and we pray that you would use us now for the benefit of others. In Jesus' name.